Look, you can write a 10-page derivation of a macroeconomic model in your sleep.
Oh, easily. I mean, if you're listening to this, you've survived the Delhi School of Economics or, some program just as grueling.
Right, exactly. You know the math. But the thing is, the RBI DPR Phase 1 exam, it doesn't care about your elegant proofs. It just wants to trick you in 60 seconds.
Yeah, it's a diagnostic minefield, really. The examiners aren't testing if you understand the core theory. They assume you do.
Right, they assume you have that baseline.
Exactly. What they're actually testing is whether you can spot these microscopic semantic traps they've planted in the multiple choice options. And you have to do it under extreme time pressure.
Which is exactly the mission for this deep dive. We are taking the RBI DPR 2026 current data reference and the theory and MCQ trap layer, and we are running a high-yield tactical revision session.
No basic definitions today.
None. We're bypassing the 101 level stuff to expose the exact mechanisms behind the exam's deliberate traps.
So what's the roadmap looking like?
We'll trace a path right from individual consumer theory, scale up to market structures, and then cross borders into international trade and balance of payments.
And then bring it back home to domestic public finance. Love it.
Yeah, and we'll end with a rapid-fire drill to really lock the correct heuristics into your short-term memory.
Perfect. Because the focus here has to be strictly on the logic required to eliminate those distractor options. So let's start at the micro-foundation.
Consumer theory. Let's do it.
Right. When the exam tests consumer behavior, they invariably use the Slutsky decomposition to see if you're going to, conflate the substitution and income effects during a price change.
Well, we know the fundamental rule, right? The substitution effect is always negative. Like, if the price of a good rises, the quantity demanded falls, assuming you're holding utility constant.
Yeah, you inherently substitute away from the relatively more expensive good. That part is easy.
Right. The exam won't try to trick you there. The trap is always hidden in the income effect.
Because its direction and magnitude depend entirely on the nature of the good itself.
Exactly. And the mechanism the exam setter manipulates here is the shift to the new indifference curve.
Right, because when the price of a good falls, your real purchasing power increases.
You just feel richer.
Exactly. For a normal good, this is totally straightforward. The income effect acts in the exact same direction as the substitution effect. You feel richer, so you buy more of the good. The demand curve just slopes down, behaving exactly as expected.
I always like to think of the income effect as the wind. Like, for a normal good, it's a tailwind. It pushes you further in the direction the substitution effect is already taking you.
That's a great analogy.
But, when the exam introduces an inferior good, that wind suddenly shifts into a headwind. Your real purchasing power goes up because of the price drop, but because the good is inferior.
Well, like maybe a low-quality staple food or something.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's inferior, you actually want less of it now that you have more real income. So that headwind partially offsets the substitution effect.
But the crucial word there is partially. That's where people get tripped up. For a standard inferior good, the negative income effect slows down the substitution effect, but it doesn't actually overtake it. The net effect still results in a downward sloping demand curve. The real trap appears when the exam pushes this mechanic to its absolute mathematical limit.
And this is where we have to be incredibly precise for you, the listener, because this exact phrasing will show up in the options. So remember this. For a Giffen good, the income effect is large, negative, and dominates this, requires an inferior good with a high budget share.
Say that one more time because it's that important.
For a Giffen good, the income effect is large, negative, and dominates it. This requires an inferior good with a high budget share.
Exactly, because the classic MCQ trap will offer a statement like, all inferior goods are Giffen goods.
Which sounds plausible if you're rushing.
Right. A stressed candidate skimming the options sees the word inferior, remembers the negative income effect, and marks it true. It is a fatal error.
Completely. Because an inferior good only crosses that threshold into Giffen territory when that negative income effect completely swallows the substitution effect, right? Reverses the law of demand entirely.
Yeah, and if it doesn't consume a massive portion of the consumer's budget, the income effect mathematically just cannot be large enough to dominate.
Okay, so we aggregate those individual consumer choices and we get the market demand curve, which naturally leads us into market structures.
Where the exam tests how firms extract surplus from that exact curve.
Right. And look, we don't need to rehash perfect competition. We all know price equals marginal cost and profits zero out in the long run.
Yeah, let's jump to the other extreme, monopoly. When a monopoly sets its output where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, it charges a price read off the demand curve, meaning price is strictly greater than marginal cost.
But here's the thing. The instinct on a timed exam is to look at that price markup and identify it as the fundamental cost of a monopoly. Like, an option will suggest that the welfare loss of a monopoly is just the wealth transferred from the consumer to the monopolist due to high prices.
Which is such a common trap.
Right. But wait, let me push back a bit just to play devil's advocate. If we're looking at welfare cost, isn't that wealth transfer the most visible damage? The consumer is paying a premium, and the firm's shareholders are capturing it. Why isn't that the primary economic cost the examiner is looking for?
It's a fair question, but in a strict utilitarian welfare calculus, a pure wealth transfer doesn't actually destroy value. It simply moves it from one agent in the economy to another.
So the total surplus remains intact, it's just redistributed.
Exactly. The exam is testing your understanding of deadweight loss. By restricting output to maintain that high price, the monopolist leaves consumers on the table who are willing to pay more than the marginal cost of production, but less than the monopoly price.
Now, those are mutually beneficial trades that just vanish into thin air.
Poof. The value is completely destroyed, not transferred. That Harburger triangle of lost trades is the only correct answer for the welfare costs of a monopoly.
Okay, that makes sense. But examiners know monopolies are too simple. The real MCQ minefield is in oligopoly theory.
Oh, absolutely. The duopoly showdown.
Right, specifically Cournot versus Bertrand.
Cournot and Bertrand models are heavily tested because they rely on totally different strategic variables. In a Cournot duopoly, the firms compete by choosing their output quantities simultaneously.
And they take the other firm's output as given.
Right. And the resulting Nash equilibrium yields a price that sits somewhere between the monopoly price and the perfectly competitive price. Crucially, price remains greater than marginal cost.
But then the exam throws the Bertrand model at you, where firms choose prices instead of quantities. And they will definitely try to catch you with a heuristic shortcut here.
They always do.
The trap option will claim something like, because a Bertrand market only has two firms, it allows them to maintain pricing power and earn monopoly profits.
Right. The exam setter is preying on the assumption that fewer firms automatically equals higher markups. But the mechanism in the Bertrand model destroys that assumption entirely.
How so?
Well, if we assume the products are perfectly homogeneous, which you must, unless the question explicitly specifies product differentiation, the demand function for an individual firm is completely discontinuous.
Meaning if firm A charges even a fraction of a penny more than firm B, firm A loses literally 100% of the market.
Exactly. It triggers an immediate race to the bottom.
Right. They undercut each other relentlessly until neither can lower the price any further without taking a loss. So the price is driven all the way down to marginal cost.
Two firms, acting purely in self-interest, arrive at the exact same outcome as infinite firms in perfect competition. Zero economic profits. The Bertrand paradox is a guaranteed testable concept.
Good to know. Okay, so taking these domestic market structures, whether they're Bertrand competitors fighting for market share or monopolies restricting output and opening the borders, leads us directly to international trade.
The fundamental engine of trade models is how countries leverage their cost structures against one another.
And I want to look at how absolute disadvantage is framed in these questions because it trips up a lot of people. An MCQ will set up a scenario where country A is technologically inferior in every conceivable way to country B.
Like, country A requires more labor, more capital, and more time to produce both computers and textiles.
Exactly. And the intuitive leap the examiner wants you to make is that country A has absolutely nothing to offer and should just autarkically produce for itself.
Which is completely wrong. They are actively trying to make you conflate absolute productivity with comparative advantage.
Right, because the underlying math of comparative advantage doesn't actually care about absolute productivity.
Not at all. It is exclusively concerned with relative opportunity cost.
It's the ratio of what you give up. Like, even if country A is terrible at making textiles, if making a computer costs them an astronomical amount of foregone textile production, while country B only gives up a little bit of textile production to make a computer.
The trade dynamic is already set. Country A will always have a lower opportunity cost in one of the goods. They produce the good, in which they sacrifice the least, and they trade for the other.
So if you see a trap option that explicitly states comparative advantage requires a country to be more efficient at producing the good, you eliminate that immediately.
Instantly. It's just a trap. And from there, the exam usually layers on the Heckscher-Ohlin theorem to explain where those comparative advantages actually come from.
Right, the HO theorem. It states that a country will export goods that are intensive in its abundant factor.
For example, if India has a massive, abundant labor force, the relative price of labor is low, so India exports labor-intensive goods.
But the examiner's trick here is swapping the words abundant and intensive, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They will offer an option saying a country exports goods where its factors are abundant rather than intensive. It's purely a semantic trap, but it catches people who are reading too fast.
You really have to read every single word. Now, another historical trade concept frequently tested is the Prebisch-Singer hypothesis.
Right, which shifts the focus from static comparative advantage to long-term price dynamics. It posits that over the long run, the terms of trade deteriorate for countries that primarily export primary commodities and import manufactured goods.
The mechanism there being that as global incomes rise, the demand for manufactured goods like, cars and electronics grows much faster than the demand for raw materials like copper or coffee.
Exactly. So the prices of manufactured goods outpace primary commodities. You literally have to export more and more coffee just to buy the same tractor.
Brutal. Okay, so with goods and commodities constantly flowing across borders like this, the financial settlement of that trade brings us to our next stop, the balance of payments.
Right. And you need to remember, the BOP is not a theoretical model. It is a rigid accounting identity.
The current account plus the capital account plus the financial account plus errors and omissions must sum to zero.
Exactly. So an exam question might paint this rosy picture of a country running a massive current account surplus, exporting aggressively, and then ask what must be happening in the other accounts.
And mathematically, a surplus in the current account dictates a deficit in the capital and financial accounts.
Yes. The country is taking its surplus foreign exchange and investing it abroad. It is a net outflow of funds.
Now, the examiner will also test your understanding of how currency values impact those current account balances, specifically through currency depreciation. Which brings us to the J-curve effect.
Right.
I always look at currency depreciation the same way I look at starting a heavy weightlifting routine.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Like when you shock your body with a new stimulus, you don't instantly get stronger. On day one, your muscle fibers tear, you're exhausted, and your baseline physical performance actually drops. You have to get worse before the adaptation kicks in and you get better.
That's a perfect analogy.
Thanks. When a central bank depreciates its currency, the country's trade balance undergoes the exact same physical trauma. It worsens first.
But the exam requires you to know the exact economic mechanism causing that initial worsening. It's sticky contracts and invoicing currencies.
Right, because in the very short run, international trade is governed by existing legal agreements.
Exactly. An Indian importer bringing in machinery from Germany has already signed a contract denominated in euros. When the rupee depreciates, the price effect is instantaneous. That machinery suddenly costs significantly more in rupee terms.
But the quantity effect is severely lagged. You can't just cancel a specialized machinery order overnight or instantly find a domestic supplier. So the volume of imports stays the same, but the value you're paying skyrockets.
Meanwhile, your export volumes don't magically jump overnight either because supply chains take time to adjust. So the import bill swells while export revenues barely move, driving the trade balance into a deeper deficit.
But eventually, as those old contracts expire, the price signals change behavior, right? Domestic consumers buy fewer expensive imports, and foreign buyers snap up the now cheaper exports.
Exactly. The quantity adjustments take over, and the trade balance improves, completing the J shape on the graph. But, and this is the ZM setter will test the specific mathematical condition required for that long-term improvement to materialize.
The Marshall-Lerner condition.
Yes. The trap option will simply read, currency depreciation immediately improves the trade balance. We know the J-curve proves that false. But for it to improve even in the long run, the Marshall-Lerner condition demands that the sum of the absolute price elasticities of demand for exports and imports must be strictly greater than 1.
Got it. If the volumes are too inelastic, the depreciation never actually helps.
Yeah.
Okay, while the external sector wrestles with the balance of payments, the domestic macroeconomy requires state intervention, which naturally transitions us into our final block, public finance.
And the first concept to secure here is Wagner's law, or the law of increasing state activity.
The causal direction is what the exam tests here, right? Wagner's law asserts that as a nation's per capita income rises, government expenditure as a proportion of GDP also rises.
Exactly. The mechanism is that public goods and services, think infrastructure, healthcare, regulatory bodies, they have an income-elastic demand. As society gets richer, it basically demands a more complex, expansive state apparatus.
Makes sense. Now, following the size of the government, the exam usually tests how that government is structured through fiscal federalism.
The principle of subsidiarity is the core doctrine to know here. It dictates that expenditure responsibilities and public service delivery should be assigned to the lowest, most decentralized level of government capable of handling them efficiently.
The rationale being that local governments have better information regarding the preferences of their specific constituents.
Right.
Now, to fund all this expenditure, governments rely on taxation, which inevitably brings up the Laffer curve. Exams love the Laffer curve, but they test it in a very specific way to bait candidates who just memorize trivial facts instead of economic logic.
Oh, yeah. An option might say something like, the Laffer curve dictates that tax revenue is maximized at a 70% marginal rate.
Right. And the exam setter might use 70% or 65% based on historical empirical estimates from developed economies, hoping you'll think it's a hard macroeconomic rule.
Which it isn't. The mathematical logic of the Laffer curve is really simply an application of Rolle's theorem. At a 0% tax rate, revenue's zero. At a 100% tax rate, all legal economic activity ceases, so revenue is again zero.
Because the revenue function is continuous, there must be at least one peak where the derivative of revenue with respect to the tax rate is zero.
Exactly. The exam tests the concept that beyond that interior peak, raising rates actually reduces total revenue. The exact percentage is totally irrelevant.
Speaking of exact percentages, though, there is one numerical trap in public finance that you absolutely must memorize for the RBI DEPR.
The 15th Finance Commission's vertical devolution rate.
Yes. This dictates the share of the central divisible pool of taxes that goes directly to the states.
Now, the 14th Finance Commission had set this rate at 42%. It was a landmark increase. And because 42% was drilled into the heads of economics students for years, the examiner will almost certainly place 42% as option A.
But the 15th Finance Commission adjusted the vertical devolution to exactly 41%. And the examiner wants to see if you know why that 1 percentage point deduction occurred.
Right. It was a highly specific constitutional accounting adjustment. It happened because the state of Jammu and Kashmir was reorganized into the Union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh.
And since Union territories are administered and funded directly by the center, that 1% was pulled back from the state share to account for the center's new expenditure responsibilities.
Exactly. So 41% is the only correct answer.
All right, you've navigated the mechanisms and the traps. Now it's time to execute the rapid-fire concept drill to compress these heuristics into your working memory before you walk into the exam hall. I will frame the question as the examiner would, and you deliver the precise logic to identify the correct option. Let's begin. Ready?
Ready? Let's do it.
Question 1. What is the mandatory condition for a good to be classified as Giffen?
It must be an inferior good where the negative income effect completely dominates the substitution effect, requiring it to take up a massive share of the consumer's budget.
Question 2. What is the fundamental cause of the welfare cost in a monopoly market?
Price is set higher than marginal cost, creating a deadweight loss because mutually beneficial trades are abandoned.
Question 3. Between a Cournot and a Bertrand duopoly with homogeneous products, which yields the lower equilibrium price?
Bertrand. Price competition drives the equilibrium price all the way down to marginal cost, totally eliminating economic profits.
Question 4. Comparative advantage requires a country to possess what specific trait?
A lower opportunity cost in production. Absolute productivity is completely irrelevant to the calculation.
Question 5. According to the J-curve effect, what happens to a country's trade balance immediately following a currency depreciation?
The trade balance worsens because the price effect of sticky contracts hits immediately, while quantity adjustments are lagged.
Question 6. What does the Marshall-Lerner condition require for a currency depreciation to eventually improve the trade balance?
The sum of the absolute price elasticities of demand for exports and imports must be strictly greater than 1.
Question 7. What is the causal direction defined by Wagner's law?
Higher per capita national income causes government expenditure to rise as a larger share of total GDP.
Final question. What is the exact vertical devolution rate of the divisible pool set by the 15th Finance Commission?
41%, with the 1% deduction accounting for the Union territories of J&K and Ladakh.
And that concludes the drill. Remember, for the DPR Phase 1, raw knowledge is just the baseline. The real test is your ability to deconstruct the wording of the options and anticipate the examiner's sleight of hand.
Exactly. You have to rely on the mechanisms. When an option seems too intuitively obvious, like a monopoly's cost being its high prices or depreciation instantly fixing a trade deficit pause, run the theoretical mechanics we just discussed, spot the trap, eliminate it, and secure the mark.
I'll leave you with one final thought to analyze as you prepare. We mapped out the J-curve today and how sticky contracts and invoicing currencies cause that initial worsening of the trade balance. But consider the current trajectory of India's digital public infrastructure.
Oh, that's an interesting angle.
Right. The RBI is pushing aggressively into wholesale and retail central bank digital currencies, alongside real-time cross-border UPI linkages. The technological friction of settlement is basically evaporating.
Which changes the time frame of everything.
Exactly. If smart contracts and instantaneous digital currency settlements allow both prices and quantities to adjust across borders in real time, completely bypassing those traditional invoicing lags, what happens to the J-curve? Does the initial downward spike flatten out? Does the mathematical necessity of the J-curve disappear entirely in a frictionless digital economy? Analyze that through the lens of the Marshall-Lerner condition. Good luck on the exam.